right, you've waited long enough. It is time to bring out the second segment of the Blake and Jake Show. And this is recapping some of the awesome and spectacular fights we saw on Saturday night. Sean O'Malley won in fantastic fashion Saturday night in Miami. I enjoyed the Michelle Pereira dance before finishing the opponent just a minute in. But from that moment on, there was a feeling in the arena. It's only a matter of time before O'Malley takes the show to a level that only O'Malley could. The fight reminded me of just 3 years ago when O'Malley fought UFC debuting Chris Moutinho. So I went back and I checked the fight. I checked that fight versus this fight versus Chito Vera, and I found that Sean O'Malley connected 230 times in the fight versus Moutinho. 177 of those punches landed on Moutinho's face.
Wow.
O'Malley dominated a fight. There was really no question about that. In this fight, O'Malley connected 232 times. Now, Chito landed just 89 strikes. That's 20 more strikes in 10 minutes of fight time than Chris Moutinho was able to land. So 20 more strikes, but 10 more minutes to work. So it was pretty much the same fight. And what I like to tell everybody is Sean O'Malley has made everybody look like a Chris Moutinho sometime in their fight, whether it be Aljamain Sterling in just a quick, round in a minute or so, or Peter Yan even. At some point, Sean O'Malley just was so clean, so perfect, so technically advanced that he was able to stay ahead of any of the competition. Furthermore, haters of Sean O'Malley have been talking too much about his legs. 34 Cheetos, 89 strikes were leg kicks. O'Malley looked fine. We have seen this sort of dominance before at this level. I would entertain comparisons to Max Holloway in the way that he managed his fight with his elite footwork and speed. Max Holloway was also fearless, took on any challenge, even fighters bigger than him like McGregor and Poirier. He still does. He fights Justin Gaethje at UFC 300. I don't expect that one to go too well for him. But the key to beating, and I put quotations around key, beating Holloway early in his career was to out-wrestle him and negate the stand-up. Now, this was more because of what Holloway could do on his feet than his weaknesses on the ground. But right now, O'Malley is kind of in that same exact area where the only weakness that critics have of O'Malley is that he hasn't faced a strong wrestler. Now, back to the present. Dana White, the UFC matchmakers, and Sean O'Malley are now in talks about what is next. The first option on the table, and the fight most needing to happen for the division, is Merab Dvalishvili. He's not going away anytime soon, and as long as he keeps blasting every fighter with 30 takedowns, he will be viewed as O'Malley's boogeyman. Merab's 10-fight win streak and release from UFC Brass's purgatory has made him the likely push for the UFC. Merab also represents the toughest style matchup for O'Malley. It should be pointed out that Merab has been making his name among the veterans of the division. A fight with O'Malley would be a breath of fresh air after fighting mainstays like Jose Aldo, Peter Yan, and Henry Cejudo in his last outings. In fact, Merab's last defeat was against a young guy in Ricky Simone, 2018. That was right before he rattled off 10 straight to be where he is now. Now, next to UFC commentator Joe Rogan, Sean O'Malley called out Illia Topuria, the champion of the featherweight division. I see the matchmakers pushing this option off the table at all costs. Illia Topuria has just begun his reign. It's one probably of immense terror. I've seen Topuria in his very first fight in the UFC, and I was like, immediately, that's a champion. He's able to do it all. He does it fiercely. He makes everybody kind of get chills. His finishes aren't exactly always entertaining as much as they are just, they send a shiver down your spine. Now, the thing is that Illia has not been able to defend his belt yet. O'Malley has just defended his belt once, has a plethora of challengers awaiting in the bantamweight division. Corey Sandhagen is once again risking his spot in line for the title against Umar Nurmagomedov with a bid for the belt likely the outcome. In fact, I believe that Corey Sandhagen said he's only going to take the fight if the winner is guaranteed a spot at the title match in their next fight. I think that's very fair, by the way. Davidson Figueiredo, a former champ, fights at UFC 300 as well, and will have his eyes on gold in the new division. This fight has money all over it, Topuria versus Suga Show. But risking holds this fight for the future. It could really pay off big for the UFC. They just have to wait, and this fight just builds and builds and builds over time. Fight makers know this fight is a home run with just a little bit of time. The third option for Sean O'Malley, it's not super fun, it's not super exciting, is Peter Yan. The UFC cannot wait for the winner of Umar versus Sandhagen. Their fight comes down to a split decision versus... I'm sorry. Sean O'Malley and Peter Yan came down to a split decision. And the other losses of Peter Yan were to Merab and Aljamain Sterling, and both of those were by decisions as well. So Peter Yan is not out of this title picture by any super large means. He's right on the outside of it. If Merab is unable to enter the cage opposite Sean O'Malley, a Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Peter Yan rematch could be on the horizon. All right, we're going to stay on the topic of results of 299, but we're going to talk Dustin Poirier, who came away victorious despite being a decent-sized underdog versus Benoit Saint Denis. Poirier has been trading wins and losses since his conclusion of the McGregor saga. There was a looseness in Dustin Poirier on Saturday night, coming in as the substantial veteran of the two. I don't know if there's a better inside boxer in the UFC than Dustin Poirier. It felt like every time that the fight would just kind of get into a certain close nitty-gritty range, it felt like Dustin was defending almost effortlessly and then beaming Saint Denis with some massive counter punches. When we're talking about the two fighters standing in the pocket, pairing and trading blows, there's just nobody like Poirier. It felt to me that Saint Denis kept getting sucked into that range and would try to plant and trade and land that big shot, but Poirier would simply flow from movement to movement until he saw an opening, and then he would strike. Now the path is clearer than ever for Poirier, and it hasn't been that way in some time. The craziness of the McGregor fights are behind him. Rock bottom came courtesy of Justin Gaethje's head kick. And now Poirier has the confidence from turning back one of the UFC's hottest young prospects. Poirier now is in the best seat in the house to fight his way back to contention in the lightweight division without the pressures of before. A fight versus Matisse Gamrot, who also fought on UFC 299, or Arman Tsarukyan after UFC 300's outcome could fit Poirier's ambition for UFC gold next, while a possible rematch versus Charles Oliveira could be a UFC level moneymaker and another guaranteed barn burner. I'm going to go ahead and ask you here, Jake. Poirier has some interesting choices in the wings. Would you like him to see him turn back another prospect like Arman Tsarukyan or Matisse Gamrot, who both can offer just these absolute dangers as up-and-comers, or does he fight Charles Oliveira in a rematch? And their first fight was epic, and this fight could be another epic matchup here.
No, I want to see a rematch. Watching that UFC 299 was the first time that I saw Poirier fight like live, and man, that was so exciting. I want to see a rematch. I like rematches, so I think it would go well. Just at least for the fans' perspective, it'd be a really interesting fight.
Yeah, I'll be honest. The fight that turned me from a general fan of the UFC to just full-born, I'm all in, is Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker. And for that exact same reason, the same poetry that you saw on Saturday night, that's what I felt so many years ago. And I can remember the night. I can remember the moments. I can remember the feelings. Poirier elicits those feelings, unlike really any other UFC fighter in any of the divisions, because the way he fights, it's so clean, but it does have such a technical brilliance and beauty to it. It's spectacular. Now, I've got to say, I'm a little more 50-50 on that proposition. I think Arman Tsarukyan is a loss on anybody's record because he's just too terrifying. I think Matisse Gamrot could get him a little bit of that name, especially after beating Dos Anjos and 299. That could be a big step up for either fighter. And it's not a step up per se for Poirier, but it's not necessarily a step down, because a win over Dos Anjos is a huge thing to put on your resume there. So Matisse Gamrot, he's not just a nobody here in this fight anymore. But then again, I see your interest in Charles Oliveira, and I think those matchmakers see an interest in Oliveira as well. I want to go back up and talk a little bit more about Sean O'Malley, though. I kind of breezed through that section there. Go ahead and tell me, what were your thoughts about Sean O'Malley on Saturday night, and really just give me any thoughts. Who would you like to see him next?
Yeah, O'Malley looked so dominant throughout that fight. He didn't win by a knockout, but there really, after the second round, there just wasn't a doubt in my mind. I knew he was going to win this fight. He fought, like he's the champion. He fought like the champion. It seemed almost like he was in a completely different league than Chito Vera. You mentioned the significant strikes. He had the third most significant strikes in a title fight and the most in a UFC bantamweight title fight. He was just so dominant, so electric. It was fun to watch.
I talked about all the ways that Sean O'Malley got better, but I didn't really get to talk about his gas tank because against Peter Yan, it was a 3-round fight, but Sean O'Malley was completely gassed at the end of the 3 rounds. He answered so many questions in that bout. I don't think that people were too bothered by it, but it was something, a little bit of concern going into his next 5-round fight. Now you see him 5-round fights. It was a breeze for him. He got shot. He got hit with that body punch right at the end there. Otherwise, I don't think he would have been on the canvas breathing hard at the end of that 5th round. He kept a good pace throughout each of the rounds. Every time it felt like Chito was throwing a lot of power, trying to get back in that fight, then it was Sean O'Malley, the footwork and the pressure and the fakes that just was able to put Chito back in his place time and time again. All right, that goes ahead and finishes our second segment. We have one more segment in the books for you today, and that one's probably the most fun topic of the day. We're comparing winless teams. Vanderbilt Commodores, 2018, 2019, and the Mizzou Tigers. And I'm going to tell you, this battle was closer than you think. We're calling it the battle of the winless, but there's some talented players on both of these teams that we get to talk about. So that'll be right on the other side of this break. Thank you so much for listening to Blake and Jake Show on KCOU 88.1 FM.